HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents Ladies' Lunch and Other Stories by Lore Segal. Read by Callie Beaulieu. Ladies' Lunch. 1. Ruth, Frank, and Dario. The February ladies' lunch met at Ruth's Riverside apartment. Ladies' lunch is pronounced in quotation marks. The 5 women have grown old coming together every other month or so for the last 30 or more years around one another's tables. Ruth, Bridget, Farah, Lotta, Bessie are longtime New Yorkers. Their origins in California, County Mayo, Tehran, Vienna, and the Bronx might have grounded them, but does not these days often surface. "You remember," Ruth said, "that we are the people to whom we tell our stories. Well, I have a story for you." "Great," said Lotta. "Good," said Farah and Bessie. "A number of stories," Ruth told them, "and at the end there is a puzzle." "Good egg," said Bridget. Ruth said, "There was this party at Sylvia's that turned out to be a shiva for her cousin. Sylvia came over and asked me should she get me a chair. I told her, 'Thanks, very kind, but I'll find one when I need to sit.' 'Get you a drink?' she said. I told her, 'Sylvia, I can manage. Honestly, the cane is for balance, and I should stop fussing and go away.' 'Well, you don't have to go away.' We laughed, and Sylvia said she hoped it was okay that she had given Frank my number. He was dying to talk to me." "Frank? Which Frank is this?" "Ruth, you know, Frank Bruno." "Frank Bruno. Yes. Oh, I think it's that I think of him as Bruno Frank," Sylvia said. "Frank works in a gallery on Bleecker Street and wants to know about your old buddy, your client, what was Dario DeLessi? Anyhow, he wants to talk to you." "So why doesn't he walk over and talk?" Sylvia said. "He says he's afraid of you." I was annoyed. That is such nonsense. What does it even mean? "Where is he?" "Over there," said Sylvia, walking out the door. It had irritated her, Ruth told the friends at lunch, to find herself waiting for Frank to call. The prospect of telling her old Dario story, she said, had opened a window onto such a chunk of time. She called Sylvia and asked for Bruno's number. "Bruno," Sylvia said. "Which Bruno is this?" Frank Bruno, who wants to talk to me." Ruth had dialed and hung up because she couldn't think at the moment if it was Bruno or Frank. Frank. She dialed. "Frank, this is Ruth. You asking about Dario DeLessi has started all these stories in my head." Frank said, "That's what I hoped. God, that's what I want. I Googled you. You were Dario DeLessi's lawyer." "I was," she had told him. "There was paperwork to do with the people he hired to fabricate. That was the word, one of his sculptures. I got to go upstate with him into this sort of hangar where men were working on a 20-foot black curl. I was never happier. I loved listening to the craftsmen talking with each other." "God," Frank said. "How did you meet him?" Ruth said, "I was one of the groupies who hung around whenever he came to New York. Years later, I visited him in the Italian Alps in his place. It was like a Mesa Verde cave dwelling, if you can imagine a Bauhaus cave carved out of the Italian mountainside." "Did you know him?" "Me? No, Frank said. "I saw him once coming out of a restaurant on East 17th Street, and I walked behind him for a number of blocks. He went into a grocery, and I watched him through the window. He came out, went into a liquor store and bought a bottle. Then he got into a bus going west. Ruth told her friends. I had the thrill of thinking, so that's what Dario did on the way over to my place, like watching a scene happen 30 years ago. But then Frank said he'd been in his 20s and too shy to catch up and tell this man that he loved his show, so it must have been Dario's early show, years before the one man at the Guggenheim, before I even knew him. I told Frank that Dario might have been grateful. He used to talk about the desolation of that early success and his first New York visit before he knew people. Frank said the gallery had just acquired a DeLacy. Which one? Called Hatch. I remember. I remember the bunch of us sitting with a bottle of Malbec, trying to come up with a name for a new DeLacy piece to replace Untitled. It had to be what Clement Greenberg called a word independent of meaning, in the days when our favorite cartoon was a museum-goer wiping a tender tear in front of a Russian constructivist sculpture. You don't know till you try how hard it is to think of words that signify no object or feeling or value. I'd wake up in the night with the sense of triumph, bout, but that means strife. Upstanding got shot down because it commented on standing down. There are so many stories, I said. Frank said that I was a resource and asked if he could take me to lunch. But the day of the lunch he called for a rain check. Major snafu with the gallery. I've invited him up for a drink. The March ladies' lunch went out to Bessie's in Old Rockingham. Frank Bruno had not made it to Ruth's for that drink. Someone from the gallery called. Frank was out of state and would call as soon as he got back. The friend said, "Tell us the DeLacy stories you were going to tell Frank Bruno." Ruth said, "Here's something I didn't understand when I was visiting Dario." I called his attention to a man, a farmer, sitting on the pavement in the village square with a little goat on his lap. The man held the animal's hoof the way you might hold a child's or a young girl's hand. Dario said, "He's going to take the goat to be slaughtered," which I always remembered afterwards, the way you remember something that doesn't add up. Ruth said, "Dario took me on a climb. He climbed like a mountaineer, 1 foot after another at an even pace. I impressed myself by overtaking him. Then I had to sit down and recover my breath while he moved steadily on and up. And the terrifying drive up the mountain road to see the oldest houses on the highest range. You have to understand that Dario was the world's worst driver. And on the way back, we ran out of petrol, because you are statistically more likely to come upon a wayside crucifix memorializing someone's plunged to death than a gas pump. The locals, unlike Dario, drive with a spare can of gas. Dario and I sat with the car door open, and we sat until the milkman's truck came up the road. The milkman siphoned off enough gas to get us back to Altomonte. Dario took out his wallet. I had enough Italian to understand that the milkman said, "No, no, 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 grazie, signor Dario, no, che mi faccia un autografo." I wondered how many upstate New York milkmen would prefer a de Kooning or a Rothko signature to a couple of 20s. At Farah's lunch in April, Ruth reported that Frank Bruno had canceled another appointment. The friends began to smile. One of those spring colds that are so famously hard to shake. "Ruth," Farah asked her, "are you annoyed with him?" Ruth said, "I would have said no way, except that I'm telling you about it." Bessie's husband Colin was not well, so she did not come to the May lunch at Lotta's. Frank had to go and get a grown son out of some snafu and hadn't made it to the latest appointment. Here was the puzzle, and it engaged the four friends' powers of speculation. Lotta said, "First thing, if someone tells you they have a snafu, a cold, a son, is to believe them." Farah said, "One can imagine a 20-year-old too shy to approach a man with a famous name, but what stops the middle-aged New Yorker from crossing the room to speak to a woman?" "An old woman," Ruth said. "At a New York party," said Lotta. "A New York shiva," Ruth said. The June ladies' lunch met at Bridget's. Frank had not made it to Ruth's place, and Bridget said she had a story. "I asked my delightful 20-year-old niece Lily if she remembers refusing to come into the house if my 90-year-old mother was in. Lily says she remembers that my mother wore the earpiece of her glasses across her ear instead of tucked behind the ear, and she had been afraid. She remembers crying and not wanting to come in." "Lily was how old?" asked Lotta. 6 years, maybe?" "And how does that throw light on a grown man not talking to Ruth at a party?" "At a shiva," Ruth said. Bridget said, "Just another story that doesn't add up." The ladies' lunch met back at Ruth's early in July, before everybody dispersed for the summer. No, Frank had not come. Frank had called. The friends began to smile. Frank said that there was a fire in the apartment next to his apartment. The friends laughed. Bridget said, "Maybe there really was a fire." "It's possible," Ruth said. 2. Days of Martini and Forgetting. How pleasant the sight of a cheerful old person. Anon. "Love your stole," Lotta said to the handsome old woman at the party. "It's grand and beautiful." The woman thanked Lotta while her eyes flicked subliminally to the left. She did not recognize Lotta, nor could Lotta abort the identical tell on her own face. To save her children's heads, she could not have said if she had forgotten the woman's name or had never laid eyes on her. Lotta walked with a cane, and the woman in the stole offered to get her a drink. "Oh, thanks. No, I'm fine, really," Lotta told her. "I can get it myself." Lotta was happy to see Bessie by the coat rack and walked over. Bessie said, "I'm going to stow my cane. It has a way of tripping people." "You made it in from Rockingham," Lotta said. "Made it in," Bessie said. "How is Colin?" "Colin is, well enough. Colin is all right." Bessie must have known that her friends could not stand Colin, the only one of the husbands still living. Colin owned houses, cars, talked about the inadequacy of the parking, and was dying of something slow and ravaging. "Who is the old woman in the red stole?" Lotta asked Bessie. "Cynthia," said Bessie. "Your hostess?" And then Bessie added that she was surprised to see Lotta. "Why are you surprised? The third time I called to ask you for the address, you were understandably irritable. And you said you were not going." "Yes, well," Lotta said, "the prospect of leaving my apartment brings on an initial desire to take my Kindle and go to bed. A small agoraphobia, but I like parties. If you want to call it a party. I hope they do martinis." "Why isn't it a party?" asked Lotta, following her friend, who seemed to know the geography of the handsome modern apartment. They were intercepted by an unusually large young man, a younger man at any rate, who kissed Bessie and asked, "Has anybody seen Cynthia?" "Who was that?" Lottie asked Bessie. "Don't know," said Bessie. "It reminds me of the 70s, when one kept getting hugged by students who had come out from behind their beards. And who is Cynthia? Your hostess? The woman in the stole?" Bessie said. Drinks were in the kitchen, where Bessie was drawn into conversation with people she knew. Lotta put out a hand to an old man standing by himself. She said, "My late husband and I had an agreement. Every party we went to, we would talk to at least one person we didn't know. And today's my lucky day." The old man had a nice face. "Those were the days," said Lotta. "Of wine and roses," the old man said. "I was going to say the days when I used to know 80% of the people at a party. Today I know 2 people." "That's doing better than I by 1, he said. "Tell me the 2 you know." "My friend Bessie, whom I've known for over half a century, and the woman in the beautiful red stole whom I just talked with. That's the one I know." "She's my sister," said the man. "Ruthie was our aunt. I've come in from Albany." A quarter turn brought the large younger man who had kissed Bessie into the conversation. "We are talking about all the people we don't know," Lotta told him. The younger man said, "I'm developing an algorithm that will interpret the musculature of the face of the persons you're talking with and tell you who they are and how you know them." Bessie came with martinis for Lotta and herself. She said, "Let's sit down. I can't stand so long." "And just in time. I've used up my conversation starters," Lotta told her. They carried their drinks to a comfortable sofa and sat down. Lotta asked Bessie, "One more time, tell me the name of our hostess." "Cynthia." "I talked with her brother, Sebastian," said Bessie. "Who is Ruthie?" "Ruth Berger," said Bessie. "Cynthia and Sebastian's aunt, who always reminded me of that New Yorker cartoon. That is Mortimer, her first husband and her second novel." "And you still like parties?" Bessie asked Lotta. "I do," Bessie said. "I remember when we used to go in expectation always that somebody was going to happen. What do I get dressed for today? What do I come in from old Rockingham for?" "People," said Lotta. "Conversation." "And have you had a good conversation today?" "Not that kind of conversation. It's like the old balls. You take a turn with one partner and take a turn with another partner." "And you're having a good time?" "Yes, I am." Bessie was looking around the room. The set of her face told Lotta that Colin was not all right. "What makes today good for you?" Bessie asked Lotta. "Let's see. For one, my children, so far as I know, are well and are modestly solvent. 2, right knee doesn't hurt. 3, I enjoyed looking at, what's her name again? Cynthia. Looking at Cynthia's splendid red stole, and her brother, Sebastian, has a nice face. I like being in these handsome rooms and sitting on a comfortable sofa drinking a good martini. I like talking with you with the sound of a party in back of me." "The sound of a shiva," said Bessie. "Another shiva? Who's shiva?" Bessie said. "This is the shiva for Cynthia and Sebastian's Aunt Ruth Berger." "Is it? Who said that wakes and funerals are the cocktail parties of the old?" 3. How Lotta Lost Bessie. Old friends bound by the closest ties of mental sympathy will cease, after a certain year, to make the necessary journey or even cross the street to see one another. Marcel Proust. Bessie, dear friend, let me understand for which of my crimes I am to be punished by your failing to see me, your managing to not hear me calling you. Don't we hear our own name even if we happen to be milling up the aisle in a crowded concert? Why, by the way, didn't you let me know that you were coming to town? Where are you staying? I had to actually touch your elbow, and then, of course, we were all smiles and those little exclamations on my part of the sheer pleasure always of seeing you. Or did you simply not see me sitting in the row on your left, 3 places in? Our eyes aren't as quick as they used to be, it's true, and you were busy looking for a seat. You didn't take the empty place next to mine because, it turned out, you were not alone. You remember Anstis, you informed me. I'm not so good these days with names, but one isn't likely to forget Anstis. Class act. She must be in her mid-90s, half a head taller than you or I. She said, I showed you around my old Rockingham house. You said, the house next to Colin's on the right that Colin wanted you to buy. I should not have said, to give him access to the parking area, and added, totally mistaking the sorry state of my finances. You said, did I tell you we've bought a little pied-à-terre in Manhattan? You did not tell me, I said. You did not invite me to come with you and Anstis to find seats together. What didn't we used to do together, Bessie? You and Eli and Matthew and I. Our Friday night movies, Thanksgiving, Satyrs. How many New Years did we survive together, and every summer all the way back to our trip to Venice on the day the last of our foursome finished the last of the examinations. That Vaporetto, empty except for 3 Dutch students attached to overstuffed backpacks and the beautiful Venetian grandmother. You said her hair and gown were the color of pewter. The little grandson had arrived on our late flight and went to sleep with his head on her lap. I can't believe you actually live here, I said to her. She pointed through a gap on the left at her house, the Palazzo Zvi. I think we were waiting for her to invite us. She told us where to get off and how to find our hotel. The thrill, the romance, just of lugging our bags through empty Venetian streets, nobody left awake except for that party of pleasantly drunk young men sitting under a garland of vines around a table outside a closed taverna. Their shirts were the color of moons. One rose, lofted his full glass for a beacon, and walked us around 2 corners to the small hotel. That, too, was closed for the night. Through a glass inset I could see the clerk sit up on his folding cot, brace his elbows on his lap, sit his chin on the heels of his hands, and go back to sleep. Our Venetian young man banged on the door in Italian until the clerk came to hand us our keys and plumped back down on his cot. Our Venetian in the moon shirt returned, we supposed, to his friends under the vines, and we bumped our bags up the stairs and fell finally into our beds. You and I, we loved it that our men were liking each other. My Matt made up for his 5-foot-something with his continual jokes, couldn't help it. He estimated every third to be a hit, and his project, he said, was to abort the misses in between. Eli's project was to grow a beard, which, at that juncture, didn't, as I remember, promise well. And Bessie, the gondola, passing the wall pocked and striated by water, weather, time. Eli said, the grandmother didn't invite us into her palazzo because Venetian palazzi do not have insides. Matt said, but it has another facade where a gondola is passing on another canal. I can't tell you whether that's as rich as I thought it then, think it now. I was in love with the four of us. Curious, no? I would have staked my life, do stake my life on our friendship persisting into our old age. Because the guys were bent over the map, they never saw the door open, and a servant put a foot out onto the moss-covered, water-lapped stepping stone. You and I looked through the opening to the garden inside the non-existent dimension, where giant fronds growing out of a white marble bath cascaded to the terrace below. You said they were the same sharp green as the bug you kept in a matchbox when you were a child, and that it had died. The servant, having given the bucket that final swirl which doesn't ever entirely empty what is in the bottom, took a backward step and shut the door. You married Eli? Matthew and I married and watched the two of you getting on each other's nerves, though you were beautiful. You stuck by us. No brother and sister could have hung closer through the terrible long year of Matthew's dying. Eli remembers that you originally intended Colin for me because you couldn't bear me to be sad and alone. He is large and beautiful and owns a boat, you told me. We're all going to his place in Connecticut for the weekend. Not me, I said. Yes, you, you said. And he owns a house in Aix-en-Provence. I refrained from asking what you knew of me that made you imagine I could stomach Colin Woodworth. Or did I fail to refrain? I remember you looking disappointed. You're asking me, you don't think he's gorgeous? I said, Colin has drawn me 2 alternate routes from my place to his house in Old Rockingham. Well, you said, how beastly of him to want to facilitate the drive for you. Bessie, that silly man-high wooden fence to prevent the pedestrians of Bay Street from sneaking a peek at Colin Woodworth's square of grass like a toy garden kept inside the box it came in. Oh, but the deck in back. It overlooked the great crinkled blue bay, the traffic of the boats like so many little white triangles. We lay on sun-warmed wood and drank martinis, and I wished Colin would shut up about the new element in Old Rockingham, to whom agreements, he said, weren't worth the paper they were written on. What element would that be? I asked him. Eli took the moment to stand up and wonder if anyone wanted to walk into the village. You said, Colin means his pesty neighbor on the left. Colin said, like the Baineses in number 8, all they are out for is themselves, in which, I said, they probably resemble you and me and most everybody I know. I don't know what you mean, Colin said, and he fetched out the fresh Polaroid showing the Baineses' Toyota openly, brazenly parked on the Woodworth side of an imaginary line, which Colin's finger described down the center of the parking area shared by the adjacent properties. I said, but isn't that because I, in my ignorance, parked myself on the Baines side? Eli asked if you were coming for a walk or not. You said, not. Colin said, it's provocation, pure and simple. I've spoken to my lawyer in Boston. In the car, driving home from that first visit, you said, he's the perfect host. Makes good martinis, I said. The village is nice if you like museums, Eli said. You said, well, I say he's sweet. At bottom, he's a generous, affectionate man, don't you think? Colin Woodworth is an ass, and you know it. I never should have said, and I felt mean and a little guilty when Colin called to invite me for the following weekend, sounding friendly and thoroughly nice. Said he was mailing me a map.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?